The jungle was alive with strange sounds. Creatures howled in the distance. Wings beat against the dark sky, and heavy leaves dripped with glowing dew. The alien huntress moved like a shadow. Her steps soft, her senses sharp, her eyes glowed. With a hunter's fire as she followed the trail of her target, the human, he had been running for hours, his boots sinking into the wet soil, his breathing heavy but steady. To the huntress, this chase was more than a hunt. It was a game, a test of skill, and she was certain she would win. She had hunted many species before, and none had escaped her grasp. Her people called humans weak. They said humans were fragile, slow, and unworthy of true battle. But this human had lasted longer than she expected. It made her curious, and her curiosity only sharpened her hunger to finish the hunt. The human stumbled over roots, his shirt torn by branches. To the huntress, it looked like fear, but she did not notice the way his eyes scanned the ground. She did not notice how he marked every path in his mind. She only saw prey, and prey always fell. The jungle grew darker as two moons rose above. Light cut through the leaves like silver blades. The huntress leapt from tree to tree. Silent as death, her spear was ready, her claws tight, her breath slow and calm. The human paused for a moment near a stream. He bent down, cupped water in his hands, and drank quickly. His reflection in the water showed tired eyes, but also something else. Something steady, something waiting. The huntress smiled, believing he had no chance. She was wrong. She crouched on a branch, watching him. Every movement he made was loud. To her sharp ears, every heartbeat echoed to her senses. The hunt was almost over, and she could already taste victory. The human kept moving. Deeper into the forest, he stumbled again, but then kept going. He looked weak, but his steps were not random. He chose his path carefully, though the huntress did not see it. Hours passed, but the huntress never lost him. Her body was made for this, her strength endless, her speed unmatched. She thought the human was close to collapse, and in her mind, the end was near. But the human had his own thoughts. He felt the weight of the chase, but he also felt calm. He knew she was behind him, always there, always watching, and he wanted her to follow. Every step he took was part of a plan. The jungle air grew heavy, mist rising from the ground. Strange glowing insects lit the way. Like sparks of fire in the night, the huntress breathed deep, smelling the human sweat. She whispered to herself, "Almost mine." The human reached a clearing, the trees opening into a wide circle of grass and stone. He slowed down, his hands resting on his knees. To the huntress, it was the sign of exhaustion. She prepared to strike, her heart racing with thrill. But still, the human waited. His eyes scanned the edges of the clearing. He stood there as if he wanted to be seen. The huntress did not question it. She only leapt forward, faster than the wind. Branches snapped, leaves fell, and her figure cut through the air like a spear. The human turned his head slightly, his eyes calm, for a second. It seemed as if he had been expecting her, but the huntress did not care. She was the predator, and he was prey. The chase had ended. The human was cornered, and there was nowhere left to run. At least, that was what the huntress believed. Her claws tightened, her spear gleamed, her body ready for the kill. Her victory was so close she could feel it in her blood. But deep inside, the human's calm stare held a secret. The huntress could not see it, not yet. She only saw prey, weak and trapped. But the human was not prey. He was something else. Something she would soon learn to fear. The jungle went silent, the air heavy, the ground waiting, and so the deadly chase neared its end. But the hunt was not truly ending. It was only beginning. Asterisk, the alien huntress stood at the edge of the clearing, her chest rising and falling slowly. Her golden eyes glowed as she studied the human. His figure tired, his body bent slightly forward. She felt pride swell inside her chest, because in her mind the hunt was over. The prey had reached his limit, and she was the predator who had cornered him. She moved closer, each step light and silent, Her weapon was raised, the blade sharp enough to cut air. The huntress thought of all the victories she had claimed before. She had hunted beasts with armored hides and warriors with fire in their hands. All of them had fallen, just as this human would fall. Her mind filled with memories of her people's lessons. They had always taught her that humans were not worth fearing. Her trainers called them weak, fragile, and short-lived. She remembered laughing with her sisters when they spoke of humans trying to fight back. To them it was a joke. To her it was fuel. Now she had her chance to prove them right. The human looked back at her, sweat on his face, dirt on his arms. His clothes were torn, his body tired, but his eyes were strange. They were calm, steady, as if he was not afraid. The huntress dismissed it, believing it was only bravado to her. Prey always tried to look strong before it broke. She tightened her grip on her spear, the metal humming softly with energy. Her heart raced with excitement, not with doubt, because doubt was not for hunters, it was for prey. And she was no prey. She was the pride of her clan, the one chosen to lead hunts. This human would become her trophy, a story she would carry home. She imagined the faces of her people when she returned. The elders would nod in approval. The young ones would whisper her name. Shira, the huntress who never failed, they would say. And in her mind, she smiled at the image. The human was not just prey now. He was proof of her skill, her pride. Wrapped around her like armor, the human shifted his weight, taking a small step to the side. His hand brushed the tall grass. His fingers relaxed. The huntress noticed, but she ignored it. To her, it looked like nervous movement, like prey trying to delay its fate. She crouched, ready to strike, her breath slow, her muscles tense like coiled ropes. She whispered to herself in her own tongue, "This is the end." Her words were filled with confidence, with certainty. The jungle seemed to bow to her will, silent and waiting for her victory. The human's chest rose and fell. He looked at the trees, then at the stones around the clearing. It was as if he was studying them. But the huntress thought nothing of it. She believed he was searching for escape. A useless attempt. She almost laughed, because she thought she knew how this would end. The huntress leapt forward, her figure swift as lightning, her weapon raised high, her eyes sharp with focus. The ground shook lightly beneath her speed. She felt the thrill of the hunt peak inside her, a wave of victory before the strike. But as she neared the human, something strange happened. He did not move back. He did not raise his hands in fear. He stood his ground calm, his eyes still locked on hers. For a brief moment, doubt brushed her heart like a shadow over fire, but her pride burned it away. "No human can stand against me," she thought. The human's lips moved, almost too quiet for her to hear. It was only one sentence, simple. "Calm, you're not the only one hunting." The words unsettled her, but she refused to show it. She growled, forcing herself forward even faster. Her pride demanded it. Her pride screamed for victory. The jungle seemed to hold its breath. Every leaf, every insect, every shadow watched as predator and prey clashed. But the roles were not as clear as the huntress believed. And while her pride told her she had already won, the human's calm stare promised something else. A promise of danger, a promise of reversal. The huntress grinned as she thrust her weapon down. She believed this moment would seal her triumph. She believed the human story ended here, in the dirt of the jungle, but unseen beneath her pride. Threads of fate were already shifting, and though she did not know it yet, the trap she thought belonged to her would soon close around her instead. The human's breath came heavy as he moved through the clearing. Sweat rolled down his face, dripping onto the dirt. His legs shook with each step. His arms hung loose by his sides. To the huntress watching from the trees, it looked like weakness. It looked like the prey had reached the end of its road. He stumbled near the stones, his boots scraping against sharp edges. The sound echoed faintly, bouncing in the still jungle air. He winced but kept moving, his pace slow and uneven. The huntress narrowed her eyes, her lips curling into a smile. The chase had worn him down, and now she could end it with ease. But inside the human's mind, the struggle was different. He felt pain, yes, his muscles burned, his throat was dry. Every part of his body screamed for rest. Yet his thoughts were steady, clear. He remembered each step he had taken, every mark he had left on the trees. He had not been running without reason. He had been guiding her, pulling her deeper into a place of his choosing. Still, he let his body act weak. He let his knees shake, his shoulders droop, because weakness was his disguise. He knew she expected fear, she expected collapse, and so he gave her the picture she wanted to see. But behind tired eyes, his mind stayed sharp. He counted his breaths, measured the distance, and waited for the right moment. The huntress followed him from above. Her claws dug into the bark as she moved along the branches. She tilted her head, studying him. Every sign told her he was close to falling. His heartbeats were heavy in her ears, his steps slow like fading drums. Her pride grew stronger with every stumble he made. She whispered to herself, "Soon he will drop, and I will strike." The human bent down, resting a hand against a rock. He breathed deep, his chest rising and falling fast. He coughed into his hand, dust mixing with spit. The huntress smirked, feeling the rush of victory, yet the human's eyes moved, always scanning, always measuring. He glanced at the tall grass, the curve of the stones, the shadows where roots spread. Every detail etched itself into his mind. For him, the struggle was not about survival, it was about timing. His body screamed louder, but he ignored it. Pain was a familiar companion, and he had learned to carry it. Each ache was a reminder that he was still alive. Each drop of sweat was proof that he could still endure. The huntress could not see this truth. All she saw was a prey animal cornered by its fate. The jungle grew quieter, the insects stilled, the birds hushed. Even the air seemed to pause as the human leaned against a tree. His hand pressed into the rough bark, grounding himself. He closed his eyes for a brief second, and when they opened again, they burned with silent resolve. The huntress crouched low on the branch, preparing to drop, her muscles coiled, her weapon gleaming. She wanted to end the struggle now, to strike before he could move, but she hesitated, savoring the moment. She wanted to watch him crumble just a little longer. She wanted to see his face when he realized there was no escape. Human coughed again, stumbling forward. His foot caught on a root, and he fell to one knee. The huntress's eyes flashed with hunger. This was the moment she had been waiting for. Her pride told her the struggle was over. Her instincts told her to leap. But the human's lips curved into the smallest smile, unseen by her sharp eyes. Because to him, the struggle was never about running, it was about surviving long enough to choose the battlefield. He was not the hunted animal she thought he was. He was the soldier who endured, the survivor who adapted, and though his body trembled, his spirit did not break. He whispered under his breath, words meant for himself. "Alone, not yet. Just a little closer." The huntress leaned forward, her claws scratching bark. She could feel his weakness, smell his fatigue. She was ready to pounce, her pride swelling with the taste of victory. But the human was ready too. His struggle was real, but hidden within it was patience. And that patience was far sharper than any weapon. The jungle watched silently as predator and prey continued their deadly game. But the truth was shifting, slow and unseen. The human struggle looked like defeat. Yet it was only the mask of something far more dangerous. A mask the huntress had yet to understand. The clearing stood silent, the night air heavy with mist. The two moons hung above like pale watchers, casting silver light through the trees. The human slowed his steps until he stopped in the very center of the open ground. He stood still, shoulders bent, chest rising fast, his body looking worn and beaten. To any hunter's eyes, it was the moment prey had finally given up. The huntress crouched high in the branches, her body coiled, her spear ready. Her golden eyes fixed on him, watching. Every movement of his body told her what she wanted to believe, that he was finished. that the long chase had drained every ounce of strength. Her lips curled into a grin, sharp and full of hunger. She whispered to herself in her native tongue, "This is the end. The hunt belongs to me." Her voice was steady, filled with pride. The jungle seemed to lean closer, the silence pressing down as if waiting for blood. The human let his knees bend, lowering himself slightly. He placed his hand on the ground as though he could no longer stand. His breath came loud, echoing faintly in the night air. It looked like surrender, like defeat, but behind his calm eyes, the truth was hidden. This was the place he had chosen. This was the moment he had prepared for. He glanced at the stones that circled the clearing. His hand brushed against the dirt where he had passed earlier. Marks almost invisible blended into the earth. Small signs only he knew, signs that told him the trap was ready. He had not run blindly. He had led her here with every step. Each stumble, each pause, each breath had been part of the path to this ground. The huntress tightened her grip on the HFY branch, her claws dug into the bark, her heart pounding with excitement. The sight of the human kneeling made her pride swell. She had broken him, she thought. She had won. And soon she would return to her clan with his body as her proof. She leapt from the tree. Landing silently on the grass, her figure towered over him, her shadow long and sharp in the moonlight. She circled him slowly, her weapon gleaming. Every step she took was filled with the confidence of a predator ready to strike. She wanted to savor this moment, to taste his fear. But the human's face did not twist in fear. Instead, his eyes were steady, his lips pressed in a thin line. A calmness she could not understand. The huntress raised her spear, its tip glowing faintly. Her muscles flexed, ready for the final thrust. She growled low, "Stand, prey, and face your end." The human did not move. He only tilted his head slightly, as though listening to something deeper than her words. And then he whispered to himself, "Perfect." The huntress lunged, her speed blinding, her weapon slicing through the air. The human shifted just enough, his body sliding to the side. The spear struck the ground where he had stood, sending sparks into the night. The huntress roared in frustration, twisting her weapon free. But as she moved forward again, her foot pressed into the soil, and the earth responded. The hidden snare snapped. Ropes pulled tight from the ground. Sharp stakes rose from the circle of stones. Triggered by her weight, the huntress froze, shock flashing across her face. She realized too late that this ground was not his surrender. It was his design, his trap. The human stepped back, his body still tired, but his eyes burning with quiet strength. He spoke clearly this time, his voice low but firm. "You were never the hunter." "Not tonight," the huntress thrashed, pulling against the ropes, her claws tearing, her weapon swinging. But the more she fought, the tighter the trap closed. Every movement drained her pride. Every second proved her mistake. The jungle itself seemed to hold its breath. Predator and prey had reversed in an instant, and though the huntress's strength was greater, though her body was sharper, she was caught, held fast by the very ground she had ignored. The human stood above her now, not weak, not broken, but calm, steady, and victorious. Her pride screamed inside her chest. How could this fragile creature have turned her hunt? How could prey set the snare for the predator? Her eyes met his, burning with rage and disbelief, but his stare did not waver. It held no fear, only the cold truth of one who had endured and outsmarted her. The trap was set, and it had closed around her. The game she thought belonged to her was no longer hers. And in that moment, the huntress felt something she had never known before. Not pride, not thrill, but the sharp edge of fear. The ropes pulled tighter around the huntress's legs. The stakes that shot from the ground locked her in place, sharp and unyielding, her body twisted with power, muscles straining, claws tearing at the bindings. But the more she fought, the deeper the trap held. The ground itself had betrayed her pride. She snarled, her teeth bared, her golden eyes blazing with fury. She had never been caught before, never been tricked, and now, by a human of all creatures, The shame burned hotter than the ropes digging into her skin. Every thrash of her body screamed denial, but the trap did not care for her pride. The human stood a few paces away, his chest rising and falling. His body still carried the marks of exhaustion, his clothes torn, his skin bruised. Yet there was no weakness in his eyes. They were calm, sharp, and filled with something the huntress had not expected. Control. He stepped closer, his boots pressing into the damp soil. The moonlight washed over his face, showing the lines of fatigue, but also the quiet strength that held him steady. For hours he had run, he had stumbled, he had fallen, but it had all been part of the path to this moment. He had never been prey, not truly. He had been the one shaping the hunt. The huntress hissed, her claws slicing through a rope. For a second, it seemed she might break free. Her pride roared inside her, telling her that no human could hold her. But before she could move again, the human spoke. His voice was calm, low, steady. "You thought I was running from you," he said, "but I was leading you." The words cut sharper than any weapon. The huntress froze, her eyes widening with fury. She had thought herself clever. She had thought herself supreme. But now she realized she had been guided, step by step. Every stumble she had mocked, every pause she had laughed at, all of it had been a thread pulling her into this circle, into this trap. The human crouched near the edge of the snare. His hand brushed the rope, testing its hold. His movements were precise, practiced. This was not luck. This was preparation. He had planned for this moment long before the chase began. The huntress growled, spitting words in her own tongue. Trickery. "Coward's tactics," she snarled. But the human shook his head slowly. "Survival," he answered. "The only game that matters." She pulled harder, rage fueling her strength. The ropes strained, fibers snapping, but the human did not flinch. He stepped back, always out of her reach, always calm, as though he had measured every possibility. And perhaps he had. The jungle seemed to lean closer. The insects had gone silent. The air still as stone. Predator and prey had reversed. And now the huntress stood bound, her pride bleeding into the dirt, while the human, the one she had called weak, held the power. Her mind raced. How could he endure so long? How could he outthink her? Her kind valued strength, speed, and power of the body. But this human had shown something else: patience, cunning, and the will to suffer until the moment was right. The human's eyes never left hers. He wanted her to understand. He wanted her to see that she had not lost a chance. She had lost. To him, to the endurance of a species she thought was fragile, to the strategy of a mind she thought was dull. For the first time in her life, the huntress felt something she had never known. Fear. It crept up her spine, cold and sharp. Because she realized the truth. If one human could do this, what would others be capable of? The human stood tall now, his exhaustion hidden behind the steel of his gaze. He spoke again, his voice cutting through the silence of the jungle. "You wanted to prove that humans are weak," he said. "Instead, you learned that we're dangerous." The huntress roared, shaking the clearing with her fury. But it was no longer the roar of a predator. It was the cry of one who knew the hunt had turned. The turning point had come. And she was no longer the hunter. She was the caught, the broken, the defeated. The human stepped back, letting the silence sink deeper. The ropes held, the stakes gleamed in the moonlight, and the jungle carried the truth that this hunt was no longer hers. It never had been. Asterisk. The huntress pulled once more against the ropes, her muscles straining like steel. Her claws sparked as they scraped against the stakes, her golden eyes burning with rage. But no matter how she twisted, the trap only cut deeper. Her pride roared inside her chest, refusing to accept the truth. Yet the truth stood before her in the shape of the human. He moved closer, his steps steady, his face calm. Gone was the image of prey stumbling through the jungle. Gone was the weakness she had mocked. Now he carried himself with quiet authority. Not a victim, but a strategist, a survivor, a warrior. The huntress hissed, spitting words at him. You tricked me. You dared to shame me." Her voice cracked with fury, but also with something else. Something she could not hide. The sharp edge of fear. The human tilted his head, his eyes locked on hers. "You chased me," he said slowly, his tone almost quiet. "But I chose where we would end." Every word pressed against her pride like a blade, because she knew it was true. He crouched down near the snare, his hand brushing the rope as if testing it again. His movements were deliberate, controlled. This was no accident, no stroke of luck. Every step of the hunt had been built toward this moment. The exhaustion, the stumbles, the pauses. All of them were pieces of a plan. The huntress stared at him, confusion mixing with her rage. How could a human do this? She thought. Her people had called them weak, careless, and fragile. But this one had endured more than most of her. Prey. He had not only endured, he had turned the game around. The human stood tall again. His breath deep. He looked battered, yes, but he looked unbroken. His voice carried a calm weight as he spoke again. "You thought strength was enough," he said, "but strength without thought is blind." The words struck her harder than the ropes, because she realized that was what she had relied on. Strength, speed, instincts. And she had believed it would always be enough. But the human had used patience, calculation, and endurance. Weapons she had never respected. And now those weapons had defeated her. The jungle remained silent, watching. The insects did not sing. The leaves did not move. It was as though the world itself waited to see what would come next. The human walked around her slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. Each step reminded her that the power of the hunt no longer belonged to her. She growled, forcing herself to stand taller even in the trap. "I will kill you when I am free," she snarled. But the human only shook his head. "No," he answered simply, "you will remember." The words chilled her more than any weapon, because they carried no boast, no roar. They were spoken with calm certainty, and in that certainty she heard the truth. He could have killed her, now ended her life in the clearing, but he chose not to. He chose something greater. By sparing her, he carved the lesson deeper. By letting her live, he planted fear where pride once stood. The huntress felt her chest tighten because she understood what that meant. She would return to her people with this memory, and when she spoke of it, they would know. Humans were not weak, not prey. They were something more. The human stopped in front of her. His shadow stretched across her face in the silver light of the moons. His eyes burned with the quiet fire of survival. He leaned closer, his voice low. "Tell them what you saw tonight," he said. "Tell them what a human can do." The huntress clenched her jaw, fury raging inside her. But beneath it was the truth she could not escape. Her pride had been broken, her certainty shattered. The hunt had revealed not her strength, but his. The human stood before her not as prey, but as the greater predator. He stepped back, his gaze steady. The ropes creaked as she struggled once more, but she knew it was useless. Her body might break free later, but the memory would never leave. The jungle had witnessed her defeat, and the human had revealed himself for what he truly was. Not fragile, not weak, but dangerous, enduring, unyielding. Asterisk. The ropes groaned under the huntress's weight as she strained once more. Her muscles rippled with power, her claws tore at the bindings, but the trap still held. Tighter with every desperate move, she could feel her pride slipping away with each heartbeat. And worse than the trap itself was the human standing calmly before her. He did not gloat. He did not roar his victory. He simply watched her with steady eyes, as if he had already seen this ending before. The calmness in his gaze struck her harder than any weapon, because it told her the truth she did not want to believe. He had not survived her hunt by chance. He had mastered it. The huntress lowered her head for a moment, her breath sharp. She wanted to hate him, to curse him, to deny what had happened, but the memory of the chase burned in her mind. Every stumble, every pause, every turn he had made. She saw them differently now, not as weakness, but as steps of a plan. He had led her here, he had chosen this ground, and she had walked willingly into his snare. The human stepped closer, his shadow falling across her face. His voice was calm, almost quiet, but every word carried weight. "You wanted to prove I was weak," he said. "But weakness is what you chose to see." He leaned slightly closer, his eyes unblinking. "What you should remember is this. Humans are never what they seem." The huntress bared her teeth, fury mixing with fear. She wanted to spit back, to tell him she would return and tear him apart. But the words caught in her throat, because deep inside, she knew they would be a lie. Her pride still roared, but her spirit had already been marked by the truth she could not unsee. The human did not strike her. He did not finish her as prey. Instead, he turned slightly, stepping back, his hands loose at his sides. His body still weary but firm. He chose not to kill her, and that choice cut deeper than any blade. "Fear lasts longer than death," he said softly. "Carry it home with you." The huntress felt her chest tighten, because she knew he was right. If he killed her now, her people would call her a fallen warrior. But if she returned alive with this memory, her people would know something else. That humans could not be dismissed, that humans could not be hunted so easily. The jungle seemed to bow to his words. The mist curled low, the insects still silent. Even the moons above shone brighter, as if witnessing a shift in fate. The huntress, once certain of her superiority, now stood bound in shame. While the human walked past her, calm and unhurried, she twisted her head, watching him move toward the trees. Her pride screamed at her to call after him, to threaten him, but no sound left her throat, only silence, heavy and sharp. Because she knew this night would haunt her forever. The human stopped once at the edge of the clearing. He did not look back, but his voice carried across the air. "Next time you hunt a human, remember this night," he said, "because the next one you face might not let you walk away." Those words sank into her bones like ice. They were not just a warning, they were a truth. And the huntress knew she would never forget them. Her kind had underestimated this species, but she had seen the truth with her own eyes. Humans were not prey. They were predators who could wear the mask of weakness until the moment they struck. Ropes finally loosened hours later, after the human was long gone. The huntress collapsed to the ground, her body shaking, not from pain, but from the weight of what she had learned. She stared at the empty clearing, the stones, the ropes, the ground that had betrayed her pride, and she whispered in her own tongue, "Humans. Dangerous." When she returned to her people, they would ask what had happened. She would tell them the story. Though shame burned her throat, she would tell them of the chase, of the trap, of the human who endured. And whether they mocked her or believed her, it would not matter. Because the truth had already been written in her memory, and fear, once planted, never truly leaves. That night, under the watch of the twin moons, the huntress learned a lesson she would carry forever. Strength could break bones, but cunning could break pride, and humans, fragile in appearance, carried both. She had thought herself the hunter, but she left the clearing with the heart of the hunted, and the lesson of fear carved into her soul.